And hello, everybody. How are you guys doing? I am Dr. Alicia with Coaching with Dr. Alicia. And today I'm so excited that we are talking about this topic for Mental Health Monday. Today we're talking about breakups, y'all. Oh my gosh. There's so many feelings and emotions that happen when you put your love and trust in another person and then it doesn't work out the way you hoped. And so today you're going to get a chance to talk to two social workers. We are social workers by trade. We are interested in the dignity of human beings. We have our own code of ethics, our own values. I think this separates us from other helping professions. But we're going to talk to you today about breaking up. And then I have an expert here, Miss Fanny Tristan, and she is going to talk about breakup recovery. She specializes in helping individuals. And I'm thinking going on to her Instagram page, she really specializes in Black women. I get that impression. And you can catch her on Instagram at Her Soul Supply. Her Soul Supply. Woo, I love that. Love that topic. But I want to welcome everybody in. Hey, Holy 8 Ball. Boy, Holy 8 Ball was in the chat waiting before we got started. So I really appreciate you coming in, and Joanne. And while everybody gets settled into the chat, I want to remind everybody before we get into the topic, and I forget, I want to remind everybody that if you want to get notifications on when I talk about these topics, I want you to text the word love, LOVE, to 87948. And if you text the word love, you'll be notified when I go live on Monday. I also go live on Sunday nights with my book club, Healing Haven Book Club, that I absolutely love. We've been talking about, Fanny, all different ways of starting a relationship and how to do it and how to figure out someone's ready for being in a romantic relationship, as well as if you're ready to be in a romantic relationship. So those are the things that we talk about on Sunday nights, and to know when we go live and to be up on the forefront of mental health, everything mental health and Black folks, please be sure to text love to 87948. And we're going to dive right into the topic today. Today, we are talking about breaking up. We are diving into the process of what happens when we break up. And Fanny, welcome to Mental Health Monday.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, Dr. Alicia.
Yes, wonderful. Let's get right into the topic. And I so thank you for coming on here. So, Fanny, I'm wondering if you can discuss the issue of breaking up and what are the emotional stages. We all go through stages that typically happen when we put our hopes and dreams in this relationship, and then slowly we can see it withering away, and all the things that we do to try to get over some of these feelings of loss and abandonment. What would you have to say to that?
Yeah, I think that we don't talk enough about breakup recovery, that it's actually a period of time that we go through post breakup that can last, you know, however long it needs to last. It really is a grieving process. And I don't think that enough people make that connection that breakup is a grief, it's a grieving process, right? It's breakup loss, right? And you have to recover from that. And so when I do a lot of my work with women of color, I notice the parallels between I'm here because I went through a breakup and I'm trying to kind of figure my stuff out, and then also realizing, this is very, very much like the grieving process, right? And so when I think about those emotions, right, I think about, right, it starts with denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, right? Like these are all things that people could say, oh, yeah, this is what happens when you experience loss, right? And I think that's applicable to all kinds of loss, even though Her Soul Supply focuses on women in breakup recovery, that it's really more than just romantic breakups, right? People break up with their families, they break up with their best friends, they break up with their jobs, their careers, right? And there is always a process of loss. And so when I think about thinking of breakup, loss, and grief in this way, I think of denial being perhaps still being in that relationship longer than you need to be in it, right? Slowly breaking up in your head before doing it externally, right? Because there's a part of you that is in denial of the reality of what's happening, which could be that this relationship might be rotting, that it's no longer healthy, or that perhaps it could be abusive, or that you're just not bringing the best out of each other anymore, and that it's actually not healthy, right? And so a lot of us, we stay in denial for a long time, right? And so that can look like staying in a relationship longer than you know you should be, but it can also be, you know, being being broken up with and really struggling with the reality of that happening, or really falling into the pitfalls of that communication breakdown, right? Where maybe that person's not being clear about the fact that they have cut ties, right? And so we'll hold on to those little threads that are still there, right? Because we are really not able to accept what's happening and the change that's happening because it's scary, right? And so that's denial, and we can go through each and every one. So stop me, let me know if you want me
No,
to.
I mean, you just on what you said, I've actually like filled up my whole page with the words. It's just like, so I mean, one thing that you're saying is like nobody wants to be dumped. Like that is the worst feeling in the world, is being dumped. And it's almost like, even if you're miserable in a relationship and you know that the relationship is dissolving, it's just the idea of this rejection, and it just it stings. I personally believe that rejection is the worst thing that could ever happen to someone, or at least that's how I feel myself. Like, I have been dumped. Y'all put in the chat if you've ever been dumped, if you ever had somebody to just say, this is over, I don't want to be in this relationship with you anymore. Y'all put in the chat, tell us how you felt being dumped, because that feeling of rejection hurts so deeply. Like, it really gets into this tide. It's almost like you have no hope for the future with you, and I just want to let go. And even if you're in a work situation, y'all let me know if y'all ever been fired. That is the most painful thing. And by the way, being dumped and being fired, I have met with clients of all races, by the way, and we'll talk about something painful, and they will say, I was dumped, or they will say, I was fired. And I'll ask them a question like, okay, when were you fired? It'll be something from 15 years ago. There's still years, decades, they're still holding that pain and shock that happens, even though you know your relationship with your boss and at that company was dissolving. You could tell there were signs there, but the denial, that happens. And when that person finally breaks up with you, and when that person finally says they just don't want to continue this with you anymore, or they don't want to we're going to sever your work relationship with us, so much of our identity can be tied to these roles and areas that it hurts like there's no tomorrow. And I'm speaking from experience. I've never been fired, knock on wood, but I have been dumped, and it's just awful. And then it speaks to like quiet quitting. Like, yeah, I've quietly quit a relationship, but I've also worked some places where they never fired me, but they quietly kind of ushered me out. Like, they almost, I've worked places where I was just like, I think they're done with me, but I'm going to leave on my own terms. You could tell they just leave you out of meetings. They just quietly quit you. They quietly dump you. And whatever it is, eventually you have to come to this reality that your relationship with this person has changed. And why the grief is so complicated is that it's not like someone has passed on, because then it's easier to kind of get through it. Like, this person has passed on, but the person dumped you. You have to grieve that relationship, and God forbid you see them again. They're still alive. There's still reminders of it, and you just have to tell yourself what do you say to women of color? I heard you mention women of color who have felt this level of rejection. And I know men too. I see y'all men in here talking about, yeah, you know how it hurts. It hurts to the core, to be dumped. But and ghosted. Oh my God, ghosted. Thank you. Someone put in the chat, music makers was like, being ghosted feels terrible. What would you say to all of these people, and myself included, who's gone through this complicated thing? We try to be in denial, but you can't, because that person is not with you anymore.
No, and I think, I I think it's a very universal experience, like you're saying, and I think it's something that we don't give ourselves permission to feel because it's not like someone passed on, right? Because it's like, really, I'm going to give myself 2 weeks and I should be refreshed and ready for something else, and it's like, who created that standard? Who created that expectation? Right? And so I think when we try to just sweep it under the rug or shame ourselves into being better, I think we actually end up in what we call like a breakup cycle, where we, will kind of find these really unhelpful, ineffective ways to cope, right? That
Ooh.
might be common advice, right? About dating, or, a lot of the things that might feel like immediate gratification or quick fixes, right? And then that ends up becoming the foundation, right? That's on top of that unresolved pain. And then sometimes you end up in another relationship that's just like the last one, right? I see this a lot with right now, a lot of people would identify this time as cuffing season, right?
Yes.
And, this is kind of a slippery slope kind of season, because if you are in a place of breakup recovery, even if your breakup happened years ago, right? If there's a lot that you haven't really processed through, if you feel like the answer is still just getting into another relationship and that's going to make you feel better, or it's going to make all the lingering emotions go away, then it's going to get carried into the next relationship,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you are making a great point, because the rebound, like, you have to be cognizant that you're not shortchanging or just cutting off the grief process by rebounding into a whole nother relationship. Or what Mom Tube says, Mom Tube was like, food, you take to eating, you take to all of these different things to cover up the pain that you feel. And everybody, let me just tell y'all, you can't get around feeling your pain. You think that you can. And when you try to bury your pain in food, you try to bury your pain in just some rebound relationship, what happens is you end up suffering. You suffer. Feeling pain of a loss of a relationship. That's what we all signed up to do when we all decided to be born. However, you think about spiritual things like that, we sign up to feel pain. But what we don't sign up for is to suffer from it. And the only way, and I think this is what Fanny is talking about, the only way to get through a tough breakup or rejection is to feel all of the pain, the range and breadth of the hurt feelings that you have. And that is a necessary step to getting over a tough breakup. What would you say to that, Fanny?
Hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I think, like you said, I agree. It's definitely things that lead to other things, right? It's a thread. None of our emotions, none of our behaviors happen in this vacuum, as
Mm-hmm.
if like, okay, if I leave it over there, I can pretend it didn't impact me. Really, like our brains just don't work that way. Life doesn't work that way, and human connection doesn't work that way, right? And so when we talk about entering a relationship, right, being vulnerable with other people, right, it is a big ask of ourselves and of that other person. And when that does not work out, right, and we feel devastated, we oftentimes will just blame ourselves for why it didn't work out, right? I should have known they were going to hurt me. I should have known, I should have known they were going to cheat, like all of these little things to help us make sense of what happened. When in reality, we are human beings that are constantly changing. We are evolving, we're regressing, we're learning, we're growing, and it's actually challenging to grow together, right? You see this with people who are married all the time. Their biggest challenge is to grow together, right? People grow apart, right? And you have to make a conscious choice every morning to love someone, right?
Mhm.
Bell Hooks talked about that all the time, is like love is a choice. Love is a
Yes.
thing that is an act that you do, right? And it's just people feel so derailed when
Yeah.
it doesn't work out, and then they don't know where that love goes, or that it didn't have any value, or that there's something wrong with them, as if it was something that was always completely under their control, and that's just not always the case.
Yeah, this is so good. Before I want to talk about patterns and I want to talk about childhood. But before I get into that, we digging deep here. There's two therapists here. Someone asked, what does LCSW mean? It means licensed clinical social worker, and you are talking to two LCSWs. Thank you, Holy A Ball. That's who you're talking with today. So I also have my LCSW. I didn't put it in here, but I really should put it in. I should put my credentials in there because there's a lot, just to let you all know, there's a lot that we have to do to maintain our license. And there's a lot of relationship gurus out there, but they're not therapists. So just saying, title protection. Therapist is a special title. And the reason why therapist is a special title is not for us, it's for you guys. It's to protect the public so that you know that we are bound by code of ethics, we're bound by evidence-based practice. I can't get up here and just be talking off the top of my head. Yeah, I can tell you practice experience, but a lot of everything that we talk about in the treatment that we do is rooted a lot in evidence-based practice. So that's what separates us from the relationship gurus who aren't therapists, by the way. So that was just a public service announcement for the public. But thank you, everybody. I see some people in here. They have questions. I just want to say hello to everybody in the chat and all the people joining us. We are talking today about how to get over a tough breakup. Just things that we need to do to keep in mind about why it hurts so much, to the rejection. We have Joshua on here. He's a friend of ours. He says, we keep talking about what you feel experience from the breakup, but what about how you're transformed afterwards? Oh, Joshua, you're stepping ahead. You're stepping ahead of what we're going to talk about, the anger and resentment and how you can treat others as a result of your pain. I think that's where he's going with. So I appreciate that comment. We're going to go back. We're going to talk about that, Joshua. We'll talk about being transformed, because that is the whole point, is to get to a place of peace in your life. But before we go on, I just want to say hello to everyone. I want to tell everybody that if you want to be reminded of when we talk about these sort of topics with experts, with therapists, by the way, not just relationship experts, but actual licensed therapists. I guess licensed therapist is the same thing. You can text the word love, LOVE, to 87948, and then we'll text you and we'll let you know when we go live. So let me go back here. I want to talk about patterns because you mentioned patterns, and it's stuck out in my brain because you're right. I think it's a double-edged sword when a relationship doesn't work. On one hand, you do blame yourself, which is a slippery slope, right? You do need to stop and reflect about what red flags did you not see? What were some blind spots in yourself that you didn't get? And I think it's important, and I do this a lot with my clients, is, and especially with a lot of men who want to process things, is we try to determine what the patterns were. Tell me about all of your relationships. Who have you noticed that you're attracted to this type of person? What kind of patterns it is? Because that helps you grow from an experience that can be totally devastating. And coming up from that, you know, you are changed and you are transformed. So let's start there. What would you say about these patterns? Because you mentioned it and I thought it was a brilliant point you made. So say more about patterns.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to say about patterns, okay? Because there's the patterns, kind of like the person that made the comment about, like, what about the anger and just how they treat other people, right? And I think that question has a lot to do with patterns. I think the other day I was with my daughter, and she's 5, so she is very curious, and we're watching like The Incredibles, and she's learning about like good guys and bad guys and superheroes, and she asks me like, "Oh, what about why is this a bad guy? Why are they bad?"
Mm,
And I had to explain to her in 5-year-old terms, hurt people,
yes.
right? Something always has happened to them that they felt was unjust. They weren't heard, they weren't taken care of, and so they are hurting other people so that they feel how they feel. um, and I don't know if people are just bad. I think people are hurt, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that the same translates when people have unresolved concerns, whether it's unresolved trauma, or they have gone through a really bad breakup and just really haven't fleshed out how to process it in a way that's healthy so that they can leave it behind, right? Everything we experience, we learn from, right? But if we learn unhealthy things, right, that end up impacting us in really bad ways, we often will create a pattern, right? And that could look like, well, if I do this again and I do it the right way this time, it won't happen again. But then it happens again,
And then it happens
right?
again.
Right?
You,
And
you end
so,
up dating the same people over and over
mhm,
again. It's like you might as
yeah,
well stay with this one person and figure out what these patterns are and what is it about it, and that in
mhm,
some sense of it. Yeah.
exactly. And so, and in when we think about it in like a trauma lens, right, we call that reenactment,
Yes.
right? That we end up kind of recreating the scenario because we have a wish that if we had handled it differently, it will be different. And so sometimes we do that when we end up in maybe abusive situations, or just with someone with kind of like a type of person that we tend to be attracted to, where no, it'll be different this time. But are you even able to identify the pattern, right? Because it's never what you think it is. It's never that they look like that or they treat you this way. It's oftentimes even deeper. It's more about how they make you feel, right?
Right. Hmm.
And so that's just one example of the many kinds of patterns that we end up having during breakup recovery.
Yeah, and once you realize, it's funny, it's like once you realize this pattern, and for the work, some of the work that I do with people who are getting over a really tough breakup, is there comes an aha moment, because I will have noticed that, because we do a psychosocial assessment and we talk about their past, and I'll just be making notes in there. I can be like, tell me your relationship with your mom. Oh, okay. Tell me your relationship with your dad. And then sometimes I'll be like, I think I remember when we first started meeting together, you mentioned this about your mom. Do you see any connection there? And you will see, like, whoa, like their eyes will light up and they'll just have this realization: I am dating my mother, or I am dating my father. The same inaccessibility, the same pain that a lot of children feel, the dynamic becomes a dynamic. They unconsciously recreate all of this because, in a sense, there's this hole or feeling of incomplete feelings that they get into these relationships and they get triggered by some of these things, and they notice that they're behaving a some way, and then they're projecting, the projection and displacements that we see. And then we start working on, okay, so now that we have brought it up to the conscious mind, we are now aware of it. Believe it or not, that's 80% of the issue, just bringing that into your awareness, because you then not so much blame yourself, because you feel so empowered to now do something different, to really work through those feelings so that you can go on and understand that I want something different for myself, because I don't want to keep making these mistakes. I got to charge people for this information. This is like
coveted information.
This is good stuff, because this is what happens. What would you say to that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's like what they call a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Where we experience something, we then use ourselves as this cautionary tale, and then we end up repeating these cycles because we haven't really gotten back on track, right, in the right way. And then we kind of will end up like self-sabotaging and like ending up in this like breakup cycle. So it's like there's never anyone that is going to fulfill the needs that you have in a partner, right? Because the standards get lower, or the expectations are just so unaligned with your personal values that you don't even know how to seek the kind of partner that you need, because you lose yourself in the process, right?
Yes, losing yourself. Now you came up with another brilliant one right there, Fanny. Okay, before we get into lose self, because we're gonna talk about what happens when we lose ourselves, how do we get it back? But I just want to welcome everybody. I'm excited. I love this topic, by the way. It is something that I don't know, turn the radio on and every single song is about a bad breakup. It's like, and these are number one songs. Like, all of us on some level can just relate to the innate need to love and to be loved, and how some of us are so afraid of it. And we don't have to get into attachment issues, because it's a quarter to the hour. That's a whole nother show. Maybe I have to bring you back on here, Fanny, and we're talking about attachment, because there's all these attachment patterns that we repeat as well. But I won't open that bag of worms. But I really want to just tell everybody hello. We're talking about breakup recovery. I am Dr. Alicia. We're coaching with Dr. Alicia. Oh, and by the way, on this Thursday at 8 p.m., same time right now, I'm going to teach everybody how you can deal with your pain, some similar to the pain we're talking about today, how you deal with your pain such that you never experience stress again. So many people ask me, a lot of clients come to me about all the stress going on in their life. And I know and believe that stress is optional. You do not have to suffer. You do not need to live a life of stress. I would love for everybody to be in a mindful, meditative state. The whole world could get there. It would be totally different. If all politicians would get to that state, it would be a whole new world. I feel like this is the longest political season in the world right now. I feel like we've been campaigning for the presidency for years. Like, I feel like it's just over done. But anyway, so I just want to tell you guys to text the word love, LOVE, to 87948. Let me put it up here. And then you'll get information about how to join my big lecture that I'm teaching to everybody on Thursday night, the same time, same channel, everywhere. So you'll get information and special information on how to register for that. Okay, so let's get back to the topic. I'm here with Fanny Tristan, fellow social worker, and we're talking about breakups. So she brought up an excellent point. Losing yourself in a relationship. Fanny, how do you know that you've lost yourself in a relationship? And then what are some things that we can do to, once we recognize this, to gain ourselves again? What can we do?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Like, how do you know when you've lost yourself in a relationship? So, in the context of breakup recovery, right, it's usually very obvious when someone feels that they have completely no life outside of this person, right? They don't have their community to fall back on as easily as maybe they once did, or they haven't really been tending to their own supports outside of their partner. That's usually a very clear sign that they have lost themselves in another person in their world, right? And so when they are going through a breakup, the rug has been swiped out from under them, right? Um, I think that if you are currently in a relationship and you're wondering if you've lost yourself, right? I think you have to ask yourself how much of your partnership is based on their needs over yours, right? Um, if your whole social life is defined by what they want to do or their connections, their friendships, all the holidays are with their family, right? That there isn't as much of a interest or concern in what's important to you, how you would like to do things, what's important for like what you value and how you put your values into your life together, then you're kind of losing kind of this essence of yourself and kind of taking on your partners. And a lot of us do that willingly, right? Because if we're looking at our partners we put them on a pedestal, or we think they're like the answer to our sadness or depression, right? Or whatever phase we've been in breakup recovery, then, we very quickly give up a lot of the freedom that we actually have. We just give it away until it gets really challenging, and then we start to notice, who am I, right?
Yeah, I love what you're saying. I was thinking about just this morning. I did a video or a pillow talk with my husband, and we were talking about Haley Berry. Holly, not Holly Berry, but Haley Bailey is her name. She just broke up with DDJG or whomever this is, and it was a public breakup. And also, we know like Cardi B has her public breakup, and all of these relationships were so, all of us as the public, because they're like famous people, we're all kind of into their relationship. And how do we, talk about some of these things to the public? And I mean, what a different breakup. I mean, Haley, you hardly hear anything. They sent a press release. She didn't talk about the relationship at all. But you have somebody like Cardi B, who was literally going live, cussing out her ex-husband and talking about this kid. I mean, they were throwing mud back and forth with each other, and all of this hatred coming on. You have two different responses to this breakup. What would you have to say about social media and having some boundaries when it comes to what you're going to say to other people, how you're going to disclose this to other individuals, knowing that you're still going through these complex feelings and emotions? Probably need some therapy. Definitely Cardi B. I've never heard of her talk about going to get therapy. It would be really nice if, a lot of people would get some help with this particular loss. What would you say to that?
Mhm. I mean, I'm clearly biased. I think everyone would benefit from therapy and coaching and things like that. Um, I think that when it comes to celebrity breakups, celebrity relationship status and things like that, um, I think they have a lot of power, right? Because celebrities are, they're put on a pedestal, right? Like we have these kind of pseudo relationships with them. And so I think oftentimes, if you're someone that has been avoidant about dealing with your own stuff, it's actually really easy to attach yourself to celebrity drama. right? Because not only do you feel seen by the celebrity that you admire because, oh, they're just like us, they get dumped too, right? But that it's also um, out of context, right? Like we don't actually know what's going on in Cardi's home. We don't really know the ins and outs. We don't know what their pillow talk is like, right? We just see we see the that iceberg on the top, right? We don't really see all of that stuff that's under. And so it can be a real detachment from the reality of things. Because it's almost like taking your guidance from watching a movie,
Mhm,
you know?
mhm. Yeah, it's just a scene, a chapter. You don't know all the other things that people are doing. That's a really good point, Fanny. So, but yeah, I want to go back to before we start to wrap up everything for today. I do want to go back to losing yourself, and I love what you said about how it's normal to integrate your life into the life of someone else. And sometimes when we break up, we have to kind of untangle ourselves, sometimes financially, sometimes our friends, all of these things. And now, it's particularly with divorce. You used to be a wife, now you are an ex-wife, and so you have to embrace it's a transition to become a wife, but it's also a transition because you're no longer a wife. You have to now hold on to this new identity becoming an ex-wife. So not only do you, in the sense, lose yourself, you actually do become a different person. And the grieving process is not only grieving the relationship, not only grieving the loss of this person, but you also grieve the loss of your who you are because you're transformed, which is what our beautiful person over here in the chat mentioned. You are transformed because you're not the same. And honestly, I think on a spiritual level, and I talk about this, I really do believe this. You decide to be with a particular person because you have got to learn something from that relationship. There is no terrible relationship in that sense. I'm talking about levels, y'all. I ain't talking about, yes, there can be relationships that are awful. But I think on another level, embedded in that relationship was a lesson for you to learn. And if you don't learn that lesson, we talked about patterns, you'll keep repeating it. So when you don't see somebody like Fanny Tristan with helping you with this recovery, you won't necessarily learn your lesson, and you spend so much of your time, unfortunately, repeating all of these. It's a spiritual thing, growth. And with that, final words to people. You can comment on what I just said because I'm trying to bring it wholeheartedly to another level so that people won't feel shame and blame about it, to know it's a necessary process in your development because you are going to be a different person when relationships end. And sometimes the whole point of you being in that relationship is to learn that lesson, that it's a divine presence that comes into the relationship you have with somebody, and that the grieving process is there, but you also need to rejoice because it is an honor in some aspects to love and to be loved. And I've talked enough, but I could go on and on and on about that. It's, that's why we're here as human beings, to connect and to learn and to grow. And when you're in a relationship with somebody, you have agreed to do this. So with that, we could wrap up today's conversation about breakup recovery. Let's give some advice. What advice would you give to somebody on this breakup recovery? I'm gonna write them down and summarize them. What advice would you give? You're working with someone about recovery. What advice would you give?
Oh, I mean, I have so much advice to give. I think that's why I created a whole coaching practice out of it. But I think, a really big takeaway that I want people to have is that if you are in this breakup recovery place, even if it's recent, even if it's a year, 2 years, 3 years ago, and you're just not feeling quite right, right? I want you to get out of your comfort zone. Um, I know that can mean something different to a lot of people, um, but I find that stepping out of your world helps you have a better perspective on your world, right? We get in our heads a lot. We forget how big the world is, right? And we forget that oftentimes we've made choices about our lives that lead us to where we are, and we can make different choices, right? And oftentimes we forget that we have options. And so
Mm,
forcing ourselves to try new things or to travel or to join things that are new to them often is that gateway to realizing, oh, there are people that are like this, or oh, I didn't really, I didn't realize this, and this is interesting, right? Because trying, are- not only are you in a place where you're understanding more about the world and how big it is and how small sometimes we make ourselves, but it also helps you reconnect with you and the version of you that can actually source your own joy, your own love, and the kind of energy that comes from you. That's the people that are attracted to that energy are the people that you want around you, right?
yeah. That is so beautiful because you get stuck in the neighborhood that you dated that person in. I'm just talking like hypothetical. You dated somebody, y'all have your restaurant that y'all go to, you have your favorite movie theater that you go to, the favorite ice cream shop and coffee shop. It's like go to a different coffee shop, go to a different restaurant, go to a whole different thing. Like go on a vacation, go somewhere where you weren't with that partner, and you'll see nobody cares about your breakup. No one cares. They meet you, hey Fanny, how you doing? No one knows about your relationship. You don't have to explain whatever happened to Tommy, whatever happened to Billy. You don't have to explain it or talk about it. Just a change in scenery can be so refreshing that you just forget all about it. You're like, you know what? I'm so busy loving my life and doing all of these extra fun things out there that I haven't even thought about what was going on. So that is really beautiful. And then you get put in situations where you meet all these fun and interesting people, and you start realizing that was so silly of me. Why was I just obsessing over this fool when there's a whole lot of other men's out there for me to be with, or a whole lot of other possibilities? Possibilities. Not that you have to pursue it, but just to know there's different types of people out there. There's what? How many billions of people in this world? There's like, I don't know. I can't, don't ask me to do the math. I used to know how many billion people there are in this world. There is someone else that's gonna love you. If that
Mhm.
person don't love you, they're lost. I love getting into that because sometimes your friends can help you along, can push you along sometimes. So I think this is great advice. I think today we have talked about how to find patterns, what to look for in patterns of relationship, the fact that you can start to blame yourself when a relationship goes in a way where you feel like you haven't. We've talked about dealing with your pain and not going to rebound. Y'all, don't be getting a rebound. Don't be moving to food and all the different things to kind of cover up how you feel. But at the same time, you do need to get out there and be refreshed. You can still reflect on the relationship and learn from that, but don't get stuck in the rut. The grieving process of a loss of a relationship is just like the grieving process of any type of loss. We also talked about job. Sometimes it can be just as painful when you get fired, for everybody that's been fired in here. And all of these things. We also talked about how it's related to sometimes your childhood pain that's that you recreate. You're not even conscious that you're doing it, and so you can sort of think about how you can recreate. And no, don't be calling your ex a narcissist. I mean, narcissist, it exists, right? But narcissistic personality disorder is a clinical term. It is not meant for just anybody picking it up, right? So it's a clinical term, but don't be putting your partner down in that sense. I mean, there are narcissists. I mean, those people do exist, but you don't need to put them down necessarily. But you definitely need to discover what is it about yourself too, without blaming yourself, learning so that you can, like someone mentioned, you can transform. Relationships can transform you. So anyway, so we'll finish here today. Fanny, let everybody know how people can get a hold of you and what you got going on. Let everybody know here.
Yes, yes. So you can follow me on Instagram at Her Soul Supply. You can join my newsletter on my website. You can see my website at www.hersoulsupply.com. I have some goodies coming up in the next few months. So I do have a retreat for women of color, going through breakups, going through just needing a wellness experience. So I will be having 8 days, 7 nights in Oaxaca, Mexico in May of 2025. So I know that feels like, oh, that's far away, but it's just around the corner. And it is an 8-day trip. And so I am taking applications for it now. It's going to be an intimate group of women. I went there this past year with a group, and it was really amazing. So please check out my retreat at hersoulsupply.com and connect with me.
Excellent. So there we go. The solution is the change of scenery. And so going to Mexico and having your change of scenery, y'all look her up, hersoulsupply.com, and go on that retreat and get a change of scenery and help you get over it and bond with some people, and y'all can cry and laugh and all of that great stuff together as a wellness retreat. Wellness retreats are beautiful. So I appreciate you coordinating that, because I know what it takes to coordinate such a thing. So, but anyway, I just want to thank everybody. Someone said, where is his soul supply? What? Holy 8 Ball needs a him. Okay, we're gonna cash that away. Him soul supply, because he needs help too. So I love that. Thank you. That's some information. We got some eager men here who also want to be able to grow. So I want to thank everybody for coming on. Again, text the word love to 87948. You will get information on my webinar that I'm having on Thursday about stress. Can't be feeling stress in this world. We got to go into 2025 with no stress. So be sure to check that out while I teach that class on Thursday. And thank you so much, Fanny, for joining me. Yet another social worker, kindred spirits here. And bye-bye, everybody.